What if the part of the future that frightens us most is not what might happen, but the fact that we cannot rehearse it in advance? We can prepare for a difficult conversation. We can calculate our expenses, plan the next step, imagine several possible outcomes, and tell ourselves that we are simply being responsible. But beneath all that preparation, there is often a quieter hope. If we think far enough ahead, perhaps nothing will surprise us. Perhaps we can avoid disappointment before it happens. Perhaps we can recognize the wrong decision before we make it. Perhaps we can build a future so carefully that uncertainty will no longer have a place in it. And yet, no matter how much we plan, life keeps leaving parts of a story unwritten. A relationship changes. A familiar job no longer feels secure. A decision that once seemed obvious begins to look uncertain. Sometimes nothing has even happened yet, but the mind has already entered a future filled with imagined losses, difficult conversations, missed opportunities, and versions of ourselves that did not succeed. The body may still be sitting in a quiet room, while the mind is living through events that do not exist. Maybe this is why the future can feel so exhausting. We are not only waiting for it, we are trying to survive it before it arrives. But what if uncertainty is not a flaw in life that needs to be removed? What if it is one of the conditions that makes change, discovery, and a different version of ourselves possible? Perhaps the unknown is not asking us to stop caring about the future. Perhaps it is asking us to relate to it differently. The mind naturally searches for patterns. It wants to know what something means, what will happen next, and whether we are safe. When information is missing, the mind rarely leaves the empty space untouched. It begins to fill it. A delayed message becomes a sign that something is wrong. An uncertain meeting becomes evidence that bad news is coming. A period without visible progress begins to feel like proof that we have chosen the wrong direction. The future itself is still open, but the mind quietly turns possibility into prediction, and negative predictions often feel more convincing than hopeful ones. Not necessarily because they are more realistic, but because imagining danger can create the feeling that we are prepared for it. If we expect rejection, perhaps it will hurt less. If we assume that something will fail, perhaps we will not feel foolish for believing in it. If we never fully trust a new beginning, perhaps we will not be devastated if it ends. Fear sometimes presents itself as wisdom. It tells us that we are being careful, realistic, or mature. But beneath that caution, there may be an attempt to make pain predictable. The problem is that predictability and safety are not always the same thing. A painful outcome does not become less painful simply because we imagined it 100 times. Often we only experience the fear repeatedly before discovering what actually happens. Maybe the mind does not fear the future itself. Maybe it fears being unable to control its emotional response to the future. We want to know not only what will happen, but whether we will be able to handle it. And that may be the deeper question hidden inside our anxiety. Not, can I predict what is coming? But can I trust myself if life does not go according to plan? There are moments when life appears stable. We know where we will be tomorrow, what our responsibilities are, who will be beside us, and what we are working toward. This stability can feel like certainty, but often it is simply familiarity. We feel safe because today resembles yesterday. The routine is recognizable, the people are familiar, and the future seems to be following a path we already understand. But familiarity does not guarantee permanence. A life can look predictable from the outside, while quietly changing underneath. A job can appear secure while no longer giving us a sense of meaning. A relationship can remain intact while both people are becoming strangers to themselves. A plan can continue moving forward even when it no longer belongs to the person we have become. Sometimes we hold on to the familiar, not because it is right for us, but because we know how to exist inside it. At least the old discomfort has a name. At least we understand its rules. The unknown offers no such agreement. This is why people sometimes remain in situations that drain them, while fearing possibilities that may actually allow them to grow. Known pain can feel safer than an unfamiliar life. But certainty was never truly available to us. Even the most carefully designed plans depend on people, circumstances, timing, and versions of ourselves that will continue to change. Perhaps trusting the unknown does not mean believing that everything will work out exactly as we hope. It may mean releasing the idea that life must reveal the entire path before we are willing to take the next honest step. Certainty asks for proof before movement. Trust begins where proof ends. We usually notice uncertainty when it takes something away. A clear answer, a familiar direction, a sense of control. But uncertainty also creates space. When the future is not fully decided, a conversation can change something. A new idea can enter. A choice can lead somewhere we did not know existed. We can discover that what we wanted a year ago is no longer what we need today. An unwritten future may feel frightening, but it is also the only future in which something genuinely new can happen. If every detail were already determined, there would be no discovery. There would only be repetition. Maybe uncertainty is not the opposite of security. Maybe it is the space in which life remains responsive. Think about the moments that changed you most. They may not have begun with confidence. They may have begun with a question, a disruption, an ending, or the uncomfortable realization that an old answer no longer worked. At the time, those moments may have felt like evidence that life was going wrong. Only later did their meaning become visible. This does not mean that every loss is secretly a gift, or that every difficult period must be turned into a beautiful lesson. Some experiences are simply painful, and forcing them to become meaningful can create another kind of pressure. But it may be worth noticing that we rarely understand an experience while we are still standing in the middle of it. The mind wants immediate meaning. Life often reveals meaning slowly. Perhaps the unknown is not empty. Perhaps it contains possibilities that cannot yet be recognized from where we are standing. There is a particular kind of waiting that can look almost identical to preparation. We tell ourselves that we will begin when the timing is clearer. We will speak when we know exactly how the other person will respond. We will change direction when we can guarantee that the new path will be better than the old one. Until then, we research, analyze, compare, and imagine. Sometimes this is necessary. Not every hesitation is fear, and not every risk should be taken. But sometimes preparation becomes a way of asking the future for a guarantee it cannot provide. We wait to feel ready, without noticing that readiness often appears after movement begins, not before it. A person may wait for confidence before expressing an idea, even though confidence might only develop through expressing it. Someone may wait to feel certain about a new direction, while certainty can only emerge through experiencing that direction. We imagine that courageous people move because they are not afraid, but perhaps they move because they no longer require fear to disappear first. This is not about forcing ourselves into reckless decisions. It is about recognizing how often life becomes smaller while we are waiting for complete emotional permission to live it. The future cannot reject us if we never enter it, but it cannot meet us either. Maybe the greater risk is not always making the wrong decision. Maybe it is building an entire life around avoiding the feeling of uncertainty. A life protected from every unknown may also become protected from intimacy, discovery, reinvention, and surprise. Sometimes the door does not open because we finally understand what is behind it. Sometimes understanding begins only after we step through. Trusting the unknown is sometimes misunderstood as blind optimism. The belief that everything will be fine, every loss will lead somewhere better, and every risk will be rewarded. But perhaps trust is something quieter and more honest. It does not say, "Nothing difficult will happen." It says, "I do not need to know everything that will happen in order to remain present now." It does not promise that every choice will be correct. It allows us to believe that even an imperfect choice can reveal something we could not have learned by remaining still. This kind of trust is not built through one dramatic act. It may grow through smaller moments, sending the message without controlling the response, allowing a plan to change, admitting that we do not yet have an answer, or making the next decision without demanding a complete map of the years ahead. The mind may continue producing scenarios. That may be what minds do. But a scenario is not a prophecy. A thought about the future is still happening in the present. And perhaps we can notice it without automatically turning it into reality. There is a difference between asking, "What might happen?" and insisting, "This is what will happen." The first question leaves room for awareness. The second can quietly imprison us inside an imagined future. Maybe the goal is not to eliminate uncertainty, but to increase our capacity to remain ourselves while uncertainty is present. Not perfectly calm, not fearless, not completely certain, simply present enough to recognize the next step when it becomes visible. We often speak about the unknown as though it were an empty darkness waiting in front of us. But the future is not only where loss may happen, it is also where relief may arrive, where a conversation may go better than expected, where we may discover a strength that could not be developed in advance, where an ending may create space for a life we would never have planned because we did not yet know we were capable of wanting it. The unknown contains what we fear, but it also contains everything we have not yet learned to imagine. Perhaps this is why trying to control the future can become so exhausting. We are attempting to manage a reality that has not formed yet, using a version of ourselves that will not remain unchanged. The person who reaches that future will have seen more, understood more, endured more, and perhaps become capable of responding in ways that the present version cannot predict. Maybe we do not have to solve tomorrow with the awareness we have today. Maybe today only asks us to meet today, to notice where fear has become prediction, to notice where caution has become paralysis, to notice where the desire for certainty is keeping us loyal to a life that no longer feels true. The future will remain partly unknown. That may never change. But our relationship with the unknown can change. We may begin to see uncertainty not as proof that something is wrong, but as evidence that the story is still moving, that new possibilities have not been excluded, that we have not reached the final version of ourselves. Perhaps the future was never asking us to predict it. Perhaps it was asking us to meet it awake. Thank you for being part of this conversation. If something in it resonated with you, there are still many questions ahead that may be worth discussing together. And perhaps the future does not require us to feel certain, only to be willing to meet it as it unfolds. Until next time.